to join me in welcoming Lisa Robertson and Elizabeth Williams.
I wanted to just tell you, she met Bernie her first day of college, not the first year, the first day. So that's how that was a pretty significant event. For any of you who have not yet been to college, I'm just going to start with some free advice. Be careful, pay attention your first month, because you will probably meet lifetime friends in the first month and maybe even the first day or the first week of college. So choose your friends wisely. When you first get to college, pay attention and go after it, but make really good decisions starting out. I want to just thank you all. We're delighted to be here. It's just a real privilege to see all of you and to welcome you as mothers and daughters. It's a wonderful place for us to be because we love being a mother and daughter most of the time. And we have, I wasn't going to say this, but we have a special club, and some of you could probably join us, and we have a Second Daughters Club. And my mother is a second daughter, I'm a second daughter, Elizabeth is a second daughter, and so by being in the Second Daughters Club, all you have to do is be a second daughter. And we find that it's a very important place to be because the first daughters are always so important because they're the oldest, and the second daughters are important because they're the second daughters. And then in our family, and actually in the one I grew up with, we have 2 daughters and then a son. Okay, the son comes and he is like Prince Charming, and everybody worships him because here is the first boy. And then there is another daughter who in my family was the baby, and another one after that. So the second daughters kind of get lost in the shuffle. So we had to just create our own club to make ourselves important. And so, are there any second daughters out there? Oh yeah, okay. All right, and heaven is a big party, and it will be a throwdown. We're going to be there a long time. So
second daughters get matching jewelry, so it's a good place to be.
All right, all that aside. All right, we are here to talk about mothers and daughters. Mothers, as many of you know, make a tremendous sacrifice. They invest so much time and love in their children. I would say they invest a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in these little babies that they bring into the world. There was a poem that was written in 1865, and it said, "The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world." And I am here to tell you that it is as true today as it was in 1865. Never underestimate the importance and the value of you as a mother, and never underestimate the importance of the value of your mother who rocked your cradle. This is a divine relationship. I think often that I did not choose my mother and I did not choose my daughter. Both of these relationships are something that God has given to me, and He gave them to me as His gift. And I would say, for better or for worse, I've had to work out some kinks in appreciating the present I was receiving from, by having the mother that I have and by having the many daughters that I have. But that's why we call this the divine duet. This is a mother-daughter relationship, is a gift that is given from God. It is not something you choose. It is not something you have really any control over. It is a gift that God has given you, and He has given it to you for some very important purposes. Tonight we want to just share with you some of the insights we have on this God-given relationship between a mother and her daughter. Our hope and our prayer is just to give you some insight and give you some ideas on how to strengthen and fortify this relationship. More importantly, we want to help all of you survive being a mother and a daughter, and not only just to survive it, but to thrive in that call. It doesn't matter where you are in your mother-daughter relationship, because there's always hope, and that's what we're here to tell you, is that there is a great future and a great hope for all of us as mothers and daughters.
So when we look at the divine duet, a duet is defined as a vocal or instrumental piece of music which has 2 parts of equal importance. And if you look at duets, if you think of some that are beautiful and in key, they're just so enjoyable to hear, but who wants to listen to one that's out of tune? So our duet is one of mothers and daughters because that's who we are, but I think in our lives there are a lot of duets, whether it's husband and wife, parents and children, even bosses and employees, but I'm not sure employees would always think that duet is divine. But it's important to look at the mother-daughter relationship because I think it's one of the most fruitful or destructive relationships that we have. So tonight we're not here to talk about how harmonious we are, because if you ever want to test that, just try writing a talk where two parts have equal importance. But our goal is just to convey how mothers and daughters can get in tune with one another. So to illustrate this, we've come up with the Divine Duet Greatest Hits. It's a very extensive collection of songs, and ranging from everything from Hannah Montana to Cher and the Righteous Brothers and Aretha Franklin. And within each song is a little nugget that we hope will equip you in your role as a mother, a daughter, or in a lot of instances, both.
All right, bring that to the first song that we have, the top 10, is this famous song, and it is called I Will Survive. Now, this is a song that I have chosen as a mother because there were many days with my 5 children that I wasn't sure I would survive. I would say days, months, weeks, and years. And you just have to power through, because sometimes you look at those little babies and you think to yourself, if you don't do it, nobody will. And you want them to survive, and you want to survive. Well, anyway, there were a lot of times that I wasn't sure about this, but the one time I really knew that I was out of control was the day that Elizabeth was born. And I had, like all of you, a lot of labor. They bring this little baby into the world, and when she was delivered, there was just such a yelp in the delivery room. It was not from the nurse or from her father, it was from Elizabeth. And she just howled, first breath. And the fear of God went through me, because I knew right then and there she was in charge of the entire delivery room. And she has remained in charge ever since. Elizabeth grew to be a very busy little girl. She did not sleep through the night. My oldest daughter slept through the night in the hospital, but that's another story. So I thought I was God's gift to perfect motherhood. And then with Elizabeth, I realized I was not. So there were times with Elizabeth, at the age of 18 months, she crawled up on her changing table, and stupid me, her changing table was in front of a window, a second-story window, and she climbed up, the window was open, letting fresh air in, and she began to push the screen out of the window. A few years later, about the age of 4, she had the bright idea that she was going to take her tricycle and ride it down a short flight of steps. Not a long flight, just a short flight, and she did. And so down she went. And then she was often, known to be doing acrobats in Wendy's. I'm waiting for French fries and Frosties. She's on the bar, splitting her chin open, and there we go, off to the emergency room again. The other thing is that there were times when she was growing up, and I really mean this seriously, and I hate to admit it, but I got to the place where I was afraid to love her, because I wasn't really sure that she was going to survive childhood. It's true. And then she started to drive, and I was afraid to love her because I wasn't sure I was going to survive her childhood or her driving. But that's a whole other story. But there was one moment, and I will tell you that being a mother of a child like that, it was really humbling, and it was really upsetting to me, because I liked having things under control, and I was out of control with her, and she was out of control with me. There was one moment, and I would ask her, just do not step over that line. And I was trying to get the upper hand and be the authority in her life. And this little girl would step right on top of the line, and she'd look at me, and I'd look at her and I'd think, she didn't disobey me, but she did defy me. So do I punish her for defying me? But she didn't disobey me, so I can't really punish her. And she would be right on top of that line looking at me, and she smiled, because she had total control, and I was out of control. So my prayer life began to change, and I began to pray a prayer. And the prayer was, you created her, she is your little girl. I don't know how to reach her, I don't know how to help her, I don't know how to get her to do what I want to do. You're her heavenly Father, and you have got to help me. And I prayed this prayer a lot, over and over again, because I was totally helpless and hopeless with her. And the other part of it is that the undercurrent is there were a lot of funny things, but there's this sinking feeling of defeat as a mother when you're not able to get your children to do just what you think they need to be doing. And my level of feeling hopeless, feeling like a failure, grew and grew and grew. Well, there was one night that I will tell, that I've told this story before, but it was probably one of the most important nights of being a mother. I had a lot of helpless prayers, hopeless prayers. I would sit on the top of my stairs and I would cry because I just couldn't get the upper hand. And the other part of it is I got meaner and meaner as she got badder and badder. And I thought maybe if I'm mean enough, she'll do what I wanted to do. But the meaner I got, the more she would arch her back and just throw herself into a fit, and me too. But one night, in the middle of the night, I was lying awake trying to figure out how do I triumph in this situation. And I just had this thought, and the thought was, the way you are disciplining your daughter, the way you discipline Elizabeth is driving her away. You discipline her like a military Marine drill sergeant, which is what I knew to do. And then the next thought was, put your arm around her, guide her, coach her to the way she needs to go. Love her to the places you want her to go. She doesn't need you to be the drill sergeant. She needs you to be her coach and encourage her along the way. And it was just the most amazing thing, because it was that thought, and I really do believe it was an answer to prayer, and I believe God spoke it to me. It totally unlocked my heart. I didn't really like being mean to her, but I didn't know what else to do. And I felt like I had a very constructive way to reach into her life and put my arm around her and guide her to where we both needed to go. The wonderful part about it is even now, if I start being mean to her in a drill sergeant, she'll still arch her back and howl, and it starts all over again. But if we can really be on the same team and go together, it has made a huge difference in our lives. But the wonderful part about it that night that I loved is that I knew that night that I had a Heavenly Father, and that God cared about me. He cared about me as a mother. He cared about all my children. He cared about Elizabeth. He cared that we succeeded. And I knew that night that if I would partner with God and invite him into my parenting, that he was going to help me and he was going to teach me how to succeed as a mother. And the most amazing thing is that we have continued to pray, and I would say he has given insight on each one of the 5 children, not always in advance, but just in the nick of time. And there's a prayer that I prayed a lot as a mother at that time, and I'm going to teach it to you. This is your Bible verse for the night, and it is, Margaret knows this one, I don't know what to do, but my eyes are on you. And I would say, as a mother, I prayed that a lot, and I just kept my eyes up and looked to the Lord, and he guided me to the places I needed to go.
So, for song number 9, we had to dig very deep into the vault of songs, and we came up with a Hannah Montana little tune. Some of you might not know this song, but it's called Nobody's Perfect. So it sounds like a very basic principle, nobody's perfect. It's something that we've heard all the time, but I don't know about you, when it comes to my mom, I expect her to be perfect. It's something that I've come to want and desire, and when she's not, I'm hurt and upset and very confused. I feel let down. The first time I realized this, I was in the 9th grade, and I had told my mom something about one of my friends, and she decided to tell her friend, who was the mother of my friend, what I had told her. And I don't know about you, but when you're in the 9th grade and your friend gets in trouble and she realizes that it's your mom's fault and your fault because you told your mom, it's pretty much the worst thing that could happen. So I was very upset, and I know she meant well, but we were having a disagreement on what was said and what had happened. So we were sitting in the car outside of school, and we were both crying because I was so mad and she felt so bad, and she just said, I'm not perfect. And it's a good thing that I'm not perfect, because if I was, I would be so great that she would want to worship me instead of God. And so really, this is just bringing you closer to him. And at the time, I just rolled my eyes and was like, what are you talking about? But now, looking back, I know that she was right. And I'm not perfect, and she's not perfect, and that is by design, because I think if we were, we wouldn't have a need for God in our lives, because we'd all be so great that we just worship ourselves and worship one another. So I think it's important for mothers and daughters to both realize this. Mothers, believe it or not, your daughters aren't perfect either. But when we're able to see that and recognize it, I think it helps to manage our expectations, and then the times when we do mess up, one way or another, it helps to be able to extend grace and let some things go, even when it's hard.
Now, at the same time, I want to talk to some mothers and tell you and give you some advice. Do not let your children be the center of your universe, because this is a really bad place for them and it's a bad place for you. Even though we want to be sometimes, I wanted to be my children's God. I wanted to be perfect for them. I wanted to meet all their needs. But I found as my children got older and as I had more children, that I wasn't capable of meeting their needs and providing what they needed. And again, it does create room for God. And it was a real relief to know that she let me off the hook by when I said I wasn't perfect. But I think sometimes there are mothers that invest so much in their children that they get disappointed because the children do disappoint them and do let them down, and also the children don't want a mother that is obsessed with them. And there was a time when I had this situation with Elizabeth, and she was the star, believe it or not, of a ballet. And it was a ballet that was being performed over a couple weeks, and this little darling at the age of 4 or 5 had one of the leading roles. That's a lot of pressure for her, and it's a lot of pressure for me. So we would practice, and she was pretty young, and she was really unpredictable. And my big fear was that she was going to get on stage and decide, in the middle of her part, that she didn't want to be there, or that she would somehow ruin the ballet. And I don't know if any of you have been in a ballet production before, but a lot of people put a lot of time into those productions. And if it hinges, she wasn't the only star, but she was one of the main stars. And so I spent, as the time for the performance got closer and closer, I was panicked that this little darling was not going to do what she needed to do. And so I did everything I could to make sure she was happy. Did she have the food she wanted? Did she sleep when she wanted? Because I thought if she was happy, maybe she would really follow through and nail this performance. And what happened was she became the center of our family, and our family totally lost its balance. The other thing that happened is I gave her too much power, too much importance, and she didn't know what to do with all of that attention and all of that power. And I know this will surprise you, but she turned into I was going to say brat, but I'm going to talk about that word later, a total tyrant. And it was really because she didn't know how to handle all the pressure that I was putting on her. And our family lost its balance. And in my mind, I felt like, because I drove a Suburban at the time, that our family was so out of balance. It was like trying to drive a Suburban down 264 with one flat tire, and you are going where you need to go, but you're just not going to get there very well. And that was how I felt about the family. When we got so out of balance, and one child became too important and became so much the focus of our family. And it wasn't just Elizabeth that became a tyrant, the rest of them did too, because they weren't exactly happy that she was running the family. But she told me that she liked it. So that brings us to the next song that we have, and this is from our famous friends, the Righteous Brothers.
You're trying hard not to show it, but baby,
all right,
I know it.
you've lost that love and feeling. I think sometimes if I were to write a book about being a mother, I would take one of these tulips and I would call my book, She Loves Me, She Loves Me Not. She loves me, she loves me not. And I think as raising a mother, especially of teenage girls, it can be like picking a petal off a flower and wondering what the petal of the day is. Is this a day she loves me? Is this a day she loves me not? And I think you have to be prepared, because sometimes you don't really know where your daughter is in that kind of relationship. And I think this is one of the things I learned at this particular time, is that I had this tendency, again, to speak cruel and unkind words to her. And believe it or not, some of my girls, I know this will surprise you, were pretty cruel and unkind to me. And I think we need to watch the words we speak. And I don't know, there's something about the chemistry between mothers and daughters, and maybe it's not in your house, but in our house, the one I was raised in and the one I raised, where mothers and daughters can say things to each other. And I would say parents and children, husbands and wives can say things to each other that are cruel and unkind. And the problem with some of these things is that the words are so powerful that if allowed, the child can begin to identify themselves by the words you say over your child. And this is getting to, if you call your child a brat, chances are you're going to get a brat. If you call your child a loser or stupid, chances are they're going to begin to behave in those ways. I didn't call Elizabeth a brat, and I didn't call her a terrible two, but I did say that she was stubborn, determined, she knew what she wanted, but I was really careful most of the time not to really put a negative word and to speak those powerful words over your children. And the other part of it is when you have those conversations and you're in those situations, what can result is a real bitterness and unforgiveness. And it's amazing because you can have these memories of harsh words that were spoken to you. And what happens is you can fester on those, and what you thought was true and what the words might have been, over time, the memory becomes really inaccurate and becomes possibly much worse than what actually happened. As a mother, I really wanted to be careful in what I said over to my children, and how I talked about them. The other thing I really wanted, also I will say, husbands count in this thing too. I wanted to be careful, and I'm not as careful with my husband as I was with my children, but I'm trying. But my goal is, as a mother of these teenagers, was to have a flower, and I would say, she loves me, she likes me. She loves me, she likes me. And I really felt that I could get that to that place by watching the words, by watching my attitudes, and by really helping, and again, getting to that place to encourage them and love them to the places they needed to go.
So going along those lines, one of the most effective ways that mothers and daughters can support one another is through encouragement, which brings us to song number 7. Build me up, Buttercup. Because I think encouragement is one of the most important gifts that we can give each other. I'm not sure about you, but my mom can do 10 things right, and I immediately notice the one thing that she has done wrong. And it's so much easier to point out the bad things versus focusing on the good. A few years ago, we all came home for Christmas, and my mom gets very excited when everybody comes to town, and she works really hard, and the house was decorated, and she puts little presents on our pillows, and we have flowers and fruit baskets when we walk in because she wants us to feel so welcome, and the refrigerator is full of food, and she just works incredibly hard. But instead of noticing all of these wonderful things, all my sisters and I could notice was that she had a VPL, or a visible panty line, and failed to wear the hanky-pankies that we had given her the previous year for Christmas. So rather than being quick
Cruel and unkind words.
Rather than being quick to scold her for breaking such a rule of fashion, a more constructive approach might have been to recognize everything that she had done for us instead of focusing on the one thing that she had done wrong. Or, if in this case, if it's simply something that must be said, you can squeeze it in to a compliment sandwich, where you just sandwich it in between two things, and you could say, "Wow, Mom, the house looks so beautiful. You might want to run upstairs and take a look at your BBL because that's just pretty embarrassing. But I love the flowers that you put beside my bed." In all seriousness, though, when I look at my life and what my mom has imparted to me, I think the biggest gift that she's given me is the gift of encouragement, because she really, truly did raise me to believe, raised all of us to believe that we could do anything that we wanted. And as cheesy as it sounds, I think all of us really do have that confidence instilled in us that we can do whatever we set our minds to. In high school, I played field hockey, and I was on the team, but I was definitely far, far, far from the star player. And eventually, somehow, I made it to the varsity team, and I had pretty much no playing time. But my mom was so faithful, she came to every single game, and I would walk across the field to meet her, and in my head, I'm like, what am I even doing here? I mean, this just isn't fun. I felt so embarrassed that she would make the effort to come to this game, and she never made me feel bad. She never made me feel like I needed to get out and run some more. She never said, we need to get that stick in your hand when you get home so you can practice. She said, "Wow, honey, you did such a good job. You were cheering for the team, and they needed you to be that cheerleader. And when you were in the game for those 2 minutes, you were the spark that they needed. Way to go." And she just made me feel so good about myself that I really saw that I had a teeny tiny role on the team. And my senior year, I ended up being captain of the field hockey team, but it was not at all because I was good, but it was because I think through her encouragement, I was able to see that I did have a role, and the team needed somebody to kind of support them from the sides, and I was happy to be that person. Yeah.
My turn? Okay. I wanted to say there is a table of field hockey players here, and they understand just how excellent she was. I really meant that when she got on the field, the whole team came alive. You didn't know it was because of Elizabeth. You were with them. All she had to do was step on the field, and you were ignited. I genuinely meant it, and that's really how I felt. I'm not sure I feel it anymore, but I felt it at the time. All right, we're going to go to another song, and this story is for my confirmation girls over here. And the next song, this is by Madonna, and it is called Vogue, and it is Strike the Pose. This is what we think. You have carpools, you have laundry, and really what you long to be is America's top model. Well, I'm here to tell you that if you have a little one in your house, you are America's top model. They are watching every single thing you do, and they are imitating you whether you like it or not. And you find sometimes as a mother that what you really don't like in your child is what you really don't like in yourself, but they've watched you and they've picked it up and they do it better than you ever did it. In our family, being a Bible study teacher for 100 years, I was really excited to get my children to learn how to read the Bible, how to pray, how to memorize scripture. We went to Sunday school, we went to youth group, we went to Young Life, we did camp in between, and I wanted to make sure that this part, the faith component of their lives, was fully ingrained in our children, and it meant a lot to me. It really did, and it still does. But we had this experience where Elizabeth came home from middle school. She was probably about in the 9th grade, and she came home and she said, "Mom, I have memorized a Bible verse." And I was thinking, oh, finally, she's doing what I want her to do. She's following my lead. She's getting scripture into her heart so she can be so smart. And I said, "Oh, honey, that's great. Tell me, what did you learn?" And she said, she came up with this verse, and she said, "Be merciful to me, O God." I said, "Okay, that's a good start." She said, "For men hotly pursue me." It is in the Bible. It's not in every translation. I'm not going to tell you where it is unless you come to me afterwards.
And Psalm 56.
And I looked at her and I thought, what was that? How in the world? And I wondered, was that really in the Bible? And then I wondered, how in the world did she even find it? But she did. She managed. And I thought to myself, I had this moment. I thought, Elizabeth is modeling me. I am her top model. And then I thought, but am I supposed to be proud of that? But I was.
Even now, I can see, for better or for worse, I am my mother's daughter. Growing up, I would always beg her to take me to the mall, and before she would ever take me to the mall, she would say, "Well, before we go there, we need to run by TJ Maxx because you just never know what you can find there." And I would say, "Mom, why can't you just pay retail like a normal mother?" But now, I'm proud to be a Maxxinista, and if my husband needs anything, I'll say, "Well, before we go to the mall, we've got to run to TJ Maxx because you just never know what you can find. Because where else can you get running socks and a designer handbag and a cookie sheet all at discounted prices?" So I'm very proud of that. Bargain shopping is now a sport that I have inherited and love. But at the same time, my mother can be bossy and controlling, and so can I, which again is an interesting component when you're working on a talk together.
We managed. All right, we are coming into our 5th song on the hit parade. Okay, ready, girls? All right, we love this song. I'll say a little prayer for you. And I will say I've said a lot of little prayers and I've said a lot of big prayers. But we have come to the decision that we've discovered that prayer is the secret weapon of a mother. You cannot believe the things that will happen if you begin to pray. And I mean this seriously. You cannot believe what happens when you begin to pray. It is one of the best weapons of motherhood. And through prayer, not only did I learn that God cared about me as a mother, and he cared about my children, as we talked about earlier, I also learned that he would just give me wisdom and insight to know what to do and when to do it and how to do it. Every night before our children went to bed, we would pray for our children, but we also prayed with our children. I think it's really important to teach your children how to pray, that they begin to develop that part of their lives at a very early age. They expected me to pray for them, and I think sometimes they even wanted it. But there was one prayer, and I even hate to tell the story, but there was one prayer that brought fear and dread to my children. Every once in a while, I will say, when the Spirit moved me, I would pray a prayer like this. Oh Lord, be with my children, guide them through the night, give them sweet dreams, keep them strong and healthy. And if there's anything they're doing that we need to know about, I ask that you would help them get caught. And I will say, I wanted them to know, we prayed this prayer together. I didn't pray it behind their backs. I prayed it with them because I wanted them to know that it wasn't just their parents who were looking out for them. It was God who was looking out for them. Now, I need to tell you this. This is like a huge caution. When you begin to pray that if there's anything you need to know about your children, they are going to get caught. And they're going to get caught again and again and again. And I will say it's a scary prayer, but so pray it responsibly. This is not to be taken, this is not to be done by amateurs. This is only to be done if you mean it. And I did have one daughter when we had a little incident, and she said to me, "It's not fair. You always pray that I get caught, and I always get caught." I thought, thank you, God. But my feeling was it was better for me to catch our children, and it was better to get them caught at young ages before they really got into huge trouble. And so I thought it was a fair prayer, and you know what? God's been faithful, and He's taking care of our children. They did get caught, but I would, experiment with that. You'll be surprised what happens.
But daughters, don't worry, because prayer can be a secret weapon for you too. And
you can tell the confirmation class over there.
Prayer works for you guys too. The first time I learned this, I was in the 3rd grade, and Amy Grant was coming to town on her legendary Heart in Motion tour, and I really, really wanted to go. And my mom was kind of going back and forth about it, but it was the same time that there was standardized testing in the 3rd grade, and so she said, I just don't think that that's responsible to send my 8-year-old to a pop concert in the middle of standardized testing, but why don't you start to pray about it? So I started praying very hard that I'd be able to go to this concert, and she called my teacher and asked, how important are these standardized tests really? And the teacher said, well, it's the funniest thing. We were supposed to do them this week, but the shipment got delayed and we had to push them back to next week. And God had heard my teeny little prayer, and as an 8-year-old, I just was so excited, and I just couldn't believe that prayer actually worked. So it was, I just felt so grateful that He cared about me enough to let that happen and teach me a valuable lesson. But just know, even when we would have disputes, sometimes we would take some time apart, pray about it, and come back, and one of us might have had a change of mind. So it can be a valuable tool for both of us, and if you're in a disagreement, you can come together and pray, and God can kind of be the mediator. But just know, if sometimes God is going to bend your mother's heart towards things, you're probably going to have to bend sometimes too. So it kind of goes both ways. For song number 4, we called in the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, for a little R-E-S-P-E-C-T. I don't know about you, but as a strong-willed daughter, obedience is so incredibly hard for me. It always has been. But in the Bible, God talks about the importance of honoring our parents. And it's so important that He included it in the 10 Commandments, right up there with don't murder, don't steal, don't have any idols, make sure you're honoring your father and your mother. In Ephesians it says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on earth. And the first time I read that, I thought, why of all the commandments is that the one that you have to give the promise to? Why couldn't it be don't murder or don't steal? Because I think I can handle those a little bit better than honoring my parents. But I will say, as hard as it is even now, the times that I have actually decided to honor them and obey them, I really have seen the ways that God has taken care of me and blessed me for that. My senior year of high school, I was very excited for one last summer in Virginia Beach. All I wanted to do was be on the beach with my friends, and my mom came to me and said, I have a really good idea. Why don't you and your sisters, let's all go to China, and we can teach English, and it's going to be so wonderful and so fun, and you're just going to love it. And of course, that's an amazing experience, but as an 18-year-old, I was not thinking about the world experience I would have. I was thinking that it was going to take me away from my friends and my life here, and I just really didn't want to go. So I think I said, that's a really good idea, but I don't think so. And she said, well, why don't you just take some time to pray about it? And she threw the secret weapon at me, and it's really easy to say no to her, but it's a lot harder for me to say no to God. So I said, okay, fine. I started praying about it, and little by little, I saw my heart begin to realize, this was going to be a good idea, and I still didn't want to go, but for some reason, I felt like it was just a chance for me to obey my mother, which is how I know that prayer works, because I would not have come to that on my own. So I think I said something to her like, okay, fine, I'll go with you, but for the record, I am not happy about this, and I still don't want to go, but I'm going to obey you and go. And what happened was, it just ended up being an incredible experience for me. It was a great chance to be with my sisters, and it opened doors that I really was not expecting at all. I went back and I studied in China in college and learned the language, and we went back and taught English again, and it really it even helped to strengthen my resume, which as an 18-year-old, I wasn't thinking about that. I had no idea that that was something that you'd even have to put together, but I saw so many different ways, the ways that God took care of me for honoring my mother. But I think as we get older, that obedience shifts to honor. It's kind of like we're called to obey our mommies and honor our mothers. When we're little, they can tell us what to wear, when to go to bed, what to eat. But as we get older, they don't really have that authority over us. So what does it look like as an adult to honor our moms? One of the big ways I think that we can do this is by taking the time to acknowledge them and listen to them, but not necessarily have to do exactly what they say. They don't have that control over us. Recently, one of my sisters and her husband were praying through an opportunity that they had, and he received a job to go to Utah. And as an East Coast mother, I'm sure many of you can relate to this, that's not exactly what you want to see, is your daughter uprooted and moved to Utah. So my parents had their own opinions about the situation, and they let my sister know, and She took the time to listen to them. She heard and respected their decision, but she knew that ultimately it had to really be between her and her husband, because no husband wants to have their wife hang up the phone with their mom and say, well, honey, I just talked to my mom, and she said it's not a good idea, and we're supposed to obey them, so I think we just need to stay put. Because it undercuts your family unit, and it really is not a good boundary to have. So she kind of walked this careful balance where she respected what they had to say, but ultimately she knew it had to be between her and her husband. And so I think there is a way to do that where you're still respectful of their opinion, but you don't necessarily end up doing it. But in this specific instance, my mother relied on the power and the secret weapon of prayer once again, and they are happily staying on the East Coast. So it did work.
All right, we're going to go to our third song now, and this is number 3 from the greatest hits. Did I lose it? This off? If we get more of the song, we can get this back together. Here's a song by Cher, and it's If I Could Turn Back Time. I think all of us have situations in our lives of things that we wish we could change. Things that happened to us, things we might have said to somebody, or things that we might have done to somebody else. One of my goals as a mother is to have as few if onlys as possible. I think so many people live their life and they look back and they say, if only I had done that, if only I hadn't done that, and the list goes on and on and on. And I just think I really want to I don't want to have a lot of if onlys. Of course, we all have them, but I just want to have as few as possible. One of the goals that I have is that I don't want to live in places of regret, but I also want to make sure that I have short accounts with people, whether it be my children or whether it be other people in my family or some of my friends. Sometimes I get easily offended, and sometimes I let those little sharp, hard words plant in my heart, and it's called a seed of bitterness will grow. And there's something about those little bitter seeds that grow, that get planted in our heart. And then the bitter seeds come from places that have been hurt. And I will water them, and I will nurture them, and I will think about them, and I will rehearse them. And all of a sudden, this bitterness has taken root in my heart, and it begins to choke out the life that's in us. And it begins to choke out our joy. One of the things that is such a paradox in life is that God calls us to forgive those who have hurt us. And I think that this is a really interesting story because we are called to forgive even if the person doesn't know that they've hurt us, even if they haven't, whether they know they've hurt us or not. The bitterness is choking the life out of you. You're the one that's being crippled by it, and I think God wants you to be the one that gets set free. I think it's interesting because I say to myself, all right, I have to forgive my mother who ruined my life. I have to give my child who just told me she hated her. I have to forgive so-and-so who wrecked my car. And this is what God has called us to do, because if you don't get free of bitterness, it's going to choke the life out of you. And one of the reasons this is important to me is because I saw my mother walk through this. And many of you know this story, and I'm going to just tell it very quickly, and we can talk about it later. But I grew up in the mountains of Colorado, and I had a 2.5-year-old sister who was killed by one of our neighbors, a neighbor boy, a young boy at that matter. And we lived in a little tiny community west of Denver, and this was a huge and horrible event. And we all had to deal with the fallout, the grief, the questions, the pain of loss. And we were all just staggering around trying to figure out how to live our lives and how to pick up our lives from that point on. I was 8 years old, and I decided, you know what, I just closed the door to my heart, and I thought I didn't really love her, and I just can't go to that place of pain. But I watched my mother, and really there were times when I didn't know that she would be able to survive the depth of that pain. Eventually and amazingly, it really led her to her faith in God. And as she came into discovering her faith in God, I began to see a real relief come into her life. But one day, several years after my sister had died, she felt that God had told her that she needed to forgive the boy that had killed my sister. And she said to God, I just can't do it. I don't have any forgiveness in me, and I can't do it. And then she said, but I am willing to forgive him if you will give me the forgiveness and if you will give me the opportunity. Both of which she thought was impossible, so she felt that was kind of a safe prayer. Amazingly, and this is the only time that I know of in her entire life that she was with this child alone. It just happened one day, and she was with him alone, and she knew that was a God-ordained moment. And she went up to him, and she talked to him, and she told him that she forgave him. And then, much to her surprise, she said, and I love you. He was somebody we really knew, and she did love him, even in spite of all of this. And the amazing thing about that is that my mother's life changed. Nothing had changed. The boy had not asked for forgiveness. He hadn't even said he was sorry. But my mother knew that the bitterness and the unforgiveness was just choking the life out of her. And it really was. But what happened, and we all saw it, her life began to change. And she, through receiving the forgiveness that God had for her, she walked in a place of wholeness. She walked in a place of freedom. And what we saw is that she learned how to enjoy her life. She learned how to laugh again. And it was miraculous. It was really miraculous. And sometimes people ask me, how do you have so much faith? And one of the ways I have so much faith is I watched my mother, and I could see God's faithfulness in her life through some really horrible situations. And even though I don't know that I really knew God when I was a child, I was so aware of his faithfulness and his love for her and for our whole family. And I would just really ask you, the wonderful thing about if I could turn back time is that when you have God's forgiveness in your life, you don't have to turn back time because you have a future and a hope. And he takes you right where you are, and he moves you into that place of the future and the hope. Now, we're going to go into song number 2. This is a great dance song, a really great dance song. Actually, a lot of these are. All right, don't stop believing. The best news is that no matter where you are in your relationship with your mother or in a relationship with your daughter or anywhere else, It is never too late to forgive them. Like my mother did, pray to be willing and look for an opportunity, a God-given opportunity to heal your relationships. Keep short of counts and know that God has a plan and a purpose for you. God is amazing, and as long as you're alive, He wants to bring you wholeness and restoration. It doesn't matter how long, if your mother has gone to be with the Lord, it doesn't matter how long ago it was. He wants you to have a vibrant, healthy, healed relationship with your mother, and that's something only God can do. Whatever the condition of your mother-daughter relationship or any relationship is, know that He has a plan and a purpose and a future and a hope. And just thank God that it's never too late for any of us, and never stop believing in what God can do.
It's time for our final song to round off the countdown. Girls just want to have fun. Because I think sometimes we get so caught up in the difficulties and the hurts and the he said, she said, that we forget that we really do love each other, and that this is a divine relationship that God has given to us. I think some of my meanest words and my biggest fights have been with my mother, but also some of my happiest memories have been with her as well. A few years ago, Spice Girls were on a reunion tour, and my sister Abby and I had our hearts completely set on going, and my mom was so sweet to surprise us and get them tickets to us for Christmas. But not only did she give them to us, she decided that if we were going to go to the Spice Girls, she was going to come with us. So she drove all the way in the snow from Virginia Beach to DC, listening to the Greatest Hits CD all the way. And when we got there, she was dancing and singing right along with us to Posh, Sporty, Baby, Ginger, and Scary. And it was one of the most fun experiences, and by far, my husband will hate me for saying this, it was the best concert of my life, because I think the Spice Girls are pretty amazing. Just remember to have fun. Take time, find the things that you love to do together, and don't let some of the hurts and the difficulties to weigh you down. So as we conclude tonight, we just want to sum up very quickly our top 10, starting with number 10.
Number 10 is I will survive. Mothering is far from easy, but you will make it through. So help me God.
Number 9 is nobody's perfect. Nobody, not even mothers or daughters, are perfect, and that is by design. Manage your expectations of one another and be willing to let things go.
Number 8 is you've lost that loving feeling. She loves me not. Don't allow hurtful words or names or situations that are spoken to you become your identity.
Number 7 is build me up, buttercup. Never underestimate the power of encouraging one another and building them up. And if you need to say something, just slide it into a compliment sandwich.
I hate that. We're on number 6 is strike the pose. You are the model for your daughters, and for better or worse, they imitate you.
Number 5 is say a little prayer. Prayer is a powerful secret weapon for both mothers and daughters, and don't be afraid to use it.
You're number 4 too.
Oh, sorry. Number 4 is RESPECT. Even when it seems impossible, when we choose to obey our mommies and honor our mothers, God is going to take care of us.
And number 3 is if I can turn back time. We can't go back and change the past, but unforgiveness and bitterness can debilitate us if we choose. Wait a minute. Can't debilitate us if we choose to forgive. Forgiveness will set you free.
You're number 2.
I'm number 2. All right, don't stop believing. No matter what hurts you've experienced, it's never too late for a fresh start in any relationship.
And number 1 is girls just want to have fun. Enjoy the gift of the relationship and remember to have fun together. So the last thing that we want to leave you with is this. Ultimately, in this duet, you do have a conductor who paired you together, who chose you to be the daughter and you to be the mother, and you each have your own parts. You are not alone in this. And he's more than able to help you live in harmony with one another. Since my middle school days, I have graduated from Psalm 56:10, "Be merciful to me, for men hotly pursue me." And I've learned a few more verses along the way. And one of those is Jeremiah 29:11, which I'm sure many of you have heard. It's, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." And we just want to encourage you and leave you here tonight knowing that not only does God have a plan and a hope for your future, but he has a plan and a hope for your relationship as a mother and daughter. And so we just hope that you are encouraged in that. So thank you very much.
And happy Mother's Day to all.
Yes.